please, could you give a warm Northern Irish welcome to Tor Arne Jonsson from the now offshore maritime cluster in Norway. Tor Arne.
Thank you very much. Tor Jonsson, Norwegian Offshore Wind. The picture you see on the slide here is from our test site. 3 comments about the previous presentation. It really fits also into our cluster in a practical way. The turbine you see on the left here was installed in 2009. This is a test site that was established by Equinor. They put the Hywind demo at the test site in 2009. Most of the companies in our clusters are coming from the oil and gas sector. So the oil price is quite important for them. Our cluster started up about 2009. It was, of course, shut down in 2013 because the oil price was going like this. No companies were interested in going into offshore wind. 2014 came, oil price went straight down. The cluster re-emerged and has been developed since 2014. If you go 3 years back, we were about 100 companies in the cluster. Today, we are 400 companies. And we haven't spent £1 on marketing. Why? Because most of the oil and gas companies see now they need to transition into new business opportunities, and offshore wind is one of these opportunities. Our cluster started as a test site and developed, emerged into a cluster because we saw that when we're gonna build and gonna install turbines, we need to have local businesses going on this. So the Norwegian society want to play in the Champions League, so to speak, to use the football jargon. So this is kind of the training ground for the companies in Norway. Here they could train, here they could produce for a demonstration site, and they could train being the best in the world. So we are trying to be the best in the world. My third point about this, I don't know how much you know about offshore wind, but our cluster organization, the dynamics in the cluster organization work like a fitness center. And especially the people going to the fitness center that is going to have the summer body of 2025, right? I don't know. So everyone in the start shows up, like in the fitness center, going to the gym every day. It goes for about 6 weeks, then it stops, right? And then June, late June, maybe 2-3 weeks before the summer holiday starts, they are back, right? This is also the dynamics in the clusters, right? What we are trying to say is that you need to be there every week, right? You need to be, you need to have endurance on this. You need to show up every week to do exercise. If you do that, then you will have the summer body of 2025. Or as in offshore wind, it's not 2025, it's more like 2035. So you have a little bit more time, but you still need to train every day to be in a competition on this. So that's my presentation, so to speak, some of my points. A little bit about the cluster. We started up as a test site, then it emerged into a cluster, and then we also established an accelerator. Because we see in offshore wind, it's a lot of challenges that need to be solved. And who solve the challenges? It's not the big companies, it's the small innovative companies. So that's kind of the structure. This is kind of a 3-legged animal. And then we also put on this conference that we call Floating Wind Days. That's kind of the big happening in our region or in Norway. And we are a national cluster. We started up as a regional cluster, but because we have so many members, we turned into a national cluster. Yes, the companies. These are the companies, 400 companies. Some features about these companies. Like I said, 85% of the companies come from the oil and gas sector. They are making a lot of money in oil and gas, right? Now they're going to turn into a business where you don't make so much money, then you need to innovate, right? First. Second, we have from large developers like Equinor, Shell, and down to small, unique companies with just 2 or 3 people, startups that have innovative ideas. And of course, we have a lot of other type of companies in this. 50% of the companies are below 50 employees. 60% of the companies are service providers. In Norway, it's too expensive. If you have drinking beer in Norway, you know it's too expensive to produce stuff in Norway. So this is an opportunity for you guys. It's too expensive to produce things in Norway, but we are very good at services. This, of course, is organized not by size or by what type of companies. It's organized by color, as you see. We're trying to know a lot about the companies in the cluster. So we have developed this model based on a supply chain approach where the businesses fits. On the top, you have the offshore wind developers like Equinor, Shell. Then you have the EPCI, that's the engineering, production, system integrators in the cluster. And then you have the tier 2, tier 3 level that you see here from development all the way to installation, operation and maintenance, lifetime extension, and ecosystem. So we have companies in all these, but we have some strongholds in the cluster. Based on the oil and gas competence we have, our stronghold, early development, a lot of the things been done there. We also do in oil and gas. Of course, turbines, it's the Danes and the Germans, right? When it comes to balance and plants, we have a lot of competence there, and we have a lot of competence on the installation and commissioning. Vessels is one of our stronghold. Operational maintenance, we are also quite good, but we have identified the areas that we are good at, and we focus on the areas that we are good at. With the mapping, we know to connect companies, and that's kind of the dynamics, DNA of the cluster. We are connectors. We connect either Norwegian companies to Norwegian companies or Norwegian companies to Northern Irish companies. So that's what we do. This is our objective. One challenge in our cluster was, should we focus on floating wind? That is an emerging market, but it's probably not going to happen before 2030. Or are we going to focus on bottom fixed? That is going on right now, but of course, it's where the Dutch and the Belgian has taken a big proportion. It's harder for Norwegian to come in that market. So we compromised. We are focused both on bottom fixed and floating, but most on floating, since that's where our DNA is. So this is our objective. Norwegians are often humble. This is not very humble. We are taking about a 15% of a global market share in this market. It's a huge market. It's probably like 160,000 turbines that is going to be installed by 2050. A little bit about the sizes of the turbines. You saw the turbines on the first slide. Those turbines are as tall as the Oval Tower, the highest building in Belfast. The new turbines, and this was a 3 megawatt turbine. The future turbine, 15 megawatts, is going to be higher than the Black Mountain Tower here in Belfast, 300 meters high. So the sizes of this, think 360,000 turbines globally, and high as 300 meters. That's the sizes of this market globally. So there are a lot of opportunities in this market. This is what the businesses in the cluster has designed. We had workshops. What should the businesses focus on? This is not a top-down approach. This is a bottom-up approach. This is what the businesses in the cluster say, what we're going to focus on. Markets, innovation, and supply chain. That's our 3 main objectives. This is what the businesses in the cluster had talked about. This is what's important for them. And this is kind of one of the key slides in my presentation. We have a lot of working groups in the cluster. They are not driven by the administration. They are driven by the businesses. So as you see here from the UK and Ireland market, we have one guy, Alfred Riesland, from MRC Global, that is the leader for that working group. Why do we do that? Because Summer Body 2035, they need to train. So all these guys have the Summer Body 2035. They are the leaders of the working groups. We are just facilitating in the cluster how the working groups are working, right? And these guys are really delivering on that. And why we do that? Because they need to get something back. And who do get something back? Then they need to be active in the cluster. And these guys, they get a lot of contracts. They got a lot of travels. They got a lot of nice places like this. Alfred couldn't join me to this session here, but he really wanted. We today have a conference in Oslo, so I rather stay with you guys, 200 people here, than being in Norway drinking very expensive beer. It's about 200 people there also. And we also have other working group that the businesses in the cluster has seen as very important to develop offshore wind sector. So here you see HSQ, very important, finance, contracts, especially for the SMEs. Contracts is very important because it's the developer that decides in this, the wind farm developer, what they do, they trickle down the risks. So the SMEs, tier 2, tier 3 level, they take most of the risks. So we have a lot of focus on that. Of course, digitalization, simulation is also a very important area. Markets, this is just lit marketing about Norway. We are funded by Innovation Norway. That's the equivalent to Invest in Northern Ireland. So I need to slow these slides just to get the funding from the Innovation Norway. These are the two areas that is going to be developed in Norway. This Southern North Sea is a bottom fixed project. The funny thing about Norway, it's very deep next to the shore. The further out you go, it gets shallower. So Southern North Sea, first project, it's a partnership between Parkwind and Ingka Investment. You probably never heard about Ingka Investment. You probably have bought a lot of products from them. They own IKEA. So they want to go into this, so all the shops in Norway, the IKEA shops in Norway, should be green. So that's why they do it. They go into this because they see green, it's important for that sector also. And of course, floating, Utsira North, it's an area on the west coast of Norway that is going to be developed. We are in the process there. So we think the floating market is going to take off. As I mentioned, oil and gas, we have a training ground already based on electrification of oil and gas platform. It's like the Scottish Intog, if you know about that. We're trying to electrify all the oil and gas. It's kind of a strange things. We are producing oil and gas as hell. At the same time, we are electrifying the oil and gas installation. So we're going to reduce the CO2 emissions. So this is also a training ground for the companies into this sector. The blue dots you see here, squares, is where the Norwegian government want to develop offshore wind. And most of the offshore wind happening in Norway is going to be floating, the new market. So this is the different market that we focus on. And this is also a key slide. When we started up the work in the cluster, the Norwegian market, the home market, was the most important one. Today, it's not. Why? There are no opportunities in the Norwegian market right now. The opportunities are other places, and that's the changes in the cluster. We change from thinking home market, very important, and then we scale. We now go to this type of market that you see here. And UK, It's kind of our home market, especially on the North Sea side. So it's a very important. It's a lot of things happening also on the floating with the first industrial floating project, the Greenvolt project, coming along in a couple of years. So we focus on a lot of countries. These are the countries where there are a lot of offshore wind happening, and the activity we do, we bring Norwegian companies and team up with the local companies. We have done a lot of activities where the Norwegian companies link to the local companies, and they establish partnership, and they target a specific market. Very good thing on that. Innovation, development, 2009 was the Hywind demo. The second one is Google had this technology, Makani. It's kind of a strange thing that it didn't work. They tried also in California to install this, but it took 5 years of permitting in California to get this in the water. In Norway, we only used 2 years, so fantastic. So, and also TetraSpar is a Danish concept, and on the right-hand side is a new concept called SeaTwirl. It's a Swedish concept that also could be available commercially in the future. The turbines that we use today is based on the concept that people have used on land for 50, 60 years. Is that the right way to do it on offshore? We don't know. So it's a lot of innovation going on this. So the test sites, we are focusing on different type of technologies. This is full-scale demonstration projects. So a lot of things are happening, and this is also a training ground for the local companies. When we demonstrate technology outside the coast of Norway, it's the local companies that do the work. It's the local companies that fabricate, it's the local companies that do the tow out, it's the local companies that do the O&M activities. So they get trained, they get fit, they get ready for summer 2035. We also have the accelerator, and this is kind of a very innovative idea, we think. We have most of the developers focusing on the Norwegian market, and we talked to them and stated, what are your challenges in getting into offshore wind market? And these challenges, we have set up workshop where we bring in companies that could solve those type of challenges. The companies that trying to solve those challenges, they get into this program where they got assistance, where they got money, so they could scale. We think we started this year, so we don't know the impacts of this yet, but we think this is the right way to do it. Supply chain, ports, very important in offshore wind. If you don't have the ports, then you don't have much in offshore wind, because the ports are, in a way, the fabrication installation place for the offshore wind. So if you have the ports, I know Northern Ireland has a lot of ports, a lot of shipyards that could be ready for this. You see here are the Norwegian ports. We have most of the Norwegian ports in the cluster. They have a dedicated working group where they work together, and their most important role is to advocate towards the Norwegian government. Let's say you need to fund us, because today, if you're going to scale into offshore wind, you need to increase your area, you need to invest a lot of money in this, and the ports do not have that kind of money today. So they want the Norwegian government to invest. And I know in UK and Scotland, you also have the same challenges with a supply chain and ports that is not ready for this sector. Yeah, here are some of the activities we do. We heard about boot camps, and we're trying to be cool, so we called it Boost Camp. To boost, you know. So this is where suppliers like EPCIs or developer set up meetings with the local supply chain, where the local supply chain could present, pitch what they do, so the developers get an overview of what type of companies are local. This is also a concept that we really like to do together with you guys here. And just to mention, a lot of the companies focusing on the Norwegian market, it's kind of the Champions League in offshore wind. We have RWE, kind of the Bayern München in football. RWE is the largest German developer. They want to go into the Norwegian market. We have Shell. It's a Dutch company, Dutch UK companies going into this. And we have a lot of other large companies. Also Iberdrola from Spain. It's kind of the Real Madrid of offshore wind. So all of these companies want to get into the Norwegian market. They don't know about the local supply chain. And that is where we connect the developers to these big companies. Last slide. This is from our floating wind days. I see you a pink here. We have blue. We also have this here. That's our logo. So we use the blue as the color, and we think, building this partnership, we're trying to build this community, so to speak. Because one thing is the funding and what they get out of it, but trust, to get innovation going, you need to have trust. So they need to feel like they're part of an environment, and this is very important. So on this, it's some facts, but it's also a lot of jokes, and it's a lot of good times on this floating wind days. We don't call it a conference, we call it floating wind days instead. Just some comments. I don't know how many minutes I have left. Just some comments about Northern Ireland. I think, as I mentioned, timing. We started up in 2009. You guys, time-wise, setting up cluster going into offshore wind now is spot on. The markets are really emerging now. So the timing is quite right. And maybe some good things about the Brexit. As we see it, you have one leg in UK, the largest offshore wind market in Europe, and you have one leg in EU, kind of the fabrication capability for this. That connection, no one else has that. So you really have some unique selling points going into this, just gateway to the EU or gateway to the UK. Last point. Supply chains in offshore wind are pan-European. Fabrication, for example, and installation of the Hywind Scotland project. Hywind Scotland was a project in Scotland, of course, since it's called Scotland. The fabrication of the floaters was done in Spain. The floater was transported to Norway. It was assembled in Norway and then towed over to Scotland. And a lot of the content is from all other countries, even Austria and Hungary, that is landlocked countries. So it's a lot of companies in Europe providing services to offshore wind, and some of the companies that you don't think could be relevant into this sector. So thank you very much.